In this video, we're going to show you how to install a wheel cylinder on your Jeep Wrangler located at the back wheels. Using a 19mm socket, loosen and remove the lug nuts. Now that we have all the lug nuts removed, go ahead and loosen, remove the wheel, and set it aside. Going to remove the rear brake drum, set that aside. We want to remove our brake shoe assembly as well as all of the springs hold it in place. Let's go ahead and start removing these pieces. On the bottom side, we want to go ahead and remove this. Use our pliers, bring that spring up and over on the outside. Grab the adjuster, slide that off the post. And grab the retainer spring here, pull that off, set that aside. Across the bottom, horizontally, we have the adjuster wheel. Right above it is another retaining spring. I'm going to use our spring tool right here. Looks like a screwdriver. It has a notch in the middle that goes in, catches that spring. Go ahead and give that a little bump and pop that out. Unhook it, set that aside. With that spring out, we can work the shoes apart and work this out. You want to pay attention to how this goes in and where the adjuster is located. Adjuster or the screw side faces the front of the vehicle. Let's go ahead and set that aside. Next, we're going to remove our upper springs. Do the same on the back. Our backward spring goes underneath the forward spring. We have a pin that comes through the back side of the backing plate, through the back side of the shoes, and they lock into this little hat or cap right here. We're going to use our tool to get on there and get on that cap and rotate it, unlocking it from that pin. Sometimes you can use a pair of pliers to grab and push and twist. Here we go. Slide the spring in the cap and pull the pin out from the back side. When doing so, that brake shoe is now going to be free. Here's the component here, and the end of it has almost like a spade tip on it, and that pushes up through the back. Comes through the center, and then you would twist this and it would lock itself in place. Let's go ahead and repeat for the rearward shoe. Now when we remove that pin in the spring from the rearward shoe and we pull this down up on this top right here, we have the e-brake setup right here. So that goes into this little notch and locks into place. Go ahead and set that shoe aside. Now running across horizontally on the top half of our axle is this component right here. Now this actually connects with this spring here. This connects to the forward shoe as well as the rearward shoe. And it just sits down in the back here, spacing them evenly in the back. So the high or notch section here goes up, does not get installed upside down like that. We're going to use our 9mm wrench and loosen the nut holding the brake line to the back of the wheel cylinder. Get it, unthread that and separate the line. In order to remove the wheel cylinder from the backing plate, there are 2 bolts that go through from the back side. Here's a new wheel cylinder, so there's going to be 2 bolts that secure this. So it's going to be positioned in like so. And on the back side of our backing plate, we're using a 9mm wrench to get the bolt out of the wheel cylinder. Now we did apply some heat to these bolts to get them to come out. Ours are pretty rusty. Yours might come out nice and easy. You gotta remove this one here and do the same for the other side. I'm gonna just use our hammer here and go ahead and tap around the backing plate and the wheel cylinder and break that free. There you have it. Go ahead and dispose of this. Now on the backing plate, I'm just gonna go ahead and give this a few taps in there. I wanna make sure that our backing plate is nice and solid before we start to reinstall all of our braking components. Let's go ahead and clean our backing plate. Spray down some solvent. Use a bristle brush. Go ahead and clean everything up. Let that dry. And then we will start our reassembly. Now make sure that the surface on the backing plate is clean and clear. Install your new wheel cylinder. There's going to be 2 bolts going in, the same 2 that we just removed. Let's go ahead and line this up. And then put the bolts in from the other side. All right, got 1 bolt in. Let's go ahead and install the other bolt on the other side. I'm going to tighten these bolts in as far as I can by hand. All right, let's tighten those down with our ratchet. Now we tighten these down. Go ahead and get that to bottom out. Give it a little bit more. You do want those tight. Go back to the other one, just double check that one there. Okay. On the back of the wheel cylinder, there's a little rubber cap in the brake line hose. So we're just gonna reach up and we're gonna pop that rubber cap out. That's gonna expose the threads. Go ahead and bring your brake line over and around and get that nut started in the back side. And once you have that threaded in, let's go ahead and tighten that down. It's a 9mm wrench to install the brake lines. Make sure it's good and snug in there. On the backing plate, there's going to be 6 points of contact for the brake shoes. There's going to be 1 here, here, 1 down below, and then there's 3 more on the forward side, pretty much on the corresponding areas. I'm going to apply a thin coat of grease on those contact points. Do that for all 6 contact points. Now before you install your brake shoes, it is very, very important to identify which one goes on the front and which one goes forward. Now if you look at these 2 side by side, there's one that is much thicker and there's a thinner one. If you look at the pad size difference, you can see that one is larger, one is smaller. The shoe with the thicker pad and the larger pad goes on the rear. Then the thinner one is going to go on the front. Take your e-brake bracket over here. You're going to take that hook. Get that, line that up inside. Bring the shoe up. We're going to line up our brake shoe where we want it to go, but we also want to take one of our pins here and slide that through. I'm going to line up that pin with the corresponding hole in the shoe. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the spade portion of that pin vertically. I'm going to take the new spring and retainer, line that over the top. push that down over the pin and twist that and lock it into place. Now just before we install our shoe over here, we have our brace right here that needs to go between the two brake shoes. And we have our old spring here. And we have the arch that faces upward. We want to slide the spring off, but notice there's a little tail of that spring facing up. Match it up to the new spring. Push that on. This center brace with the spring goes right into this notch right here. Twist this into place. Now, for any reason while you were installing your brake shoes, this center bracket with the spring popped out, totally fine. Go ahead and just work that back into place. There's enough of flexibility here to push that in. And there we have it. I'm going to install our loop end here for the self-adjuster. And put that in place. Next step is to take our cable guide, install one spring here. I can run our cable through the guide and bring this down towards the bottom. Let's go ahead and install our upper spring. On our adjuster, we put some grease on this pivot point in here, and then we put some on the threads here. Thread that all the way down inside. You can use grease. This is actually some anti-seize compound on here. And we have our main horizontal spring here. It goes between this hole here and the other one on the other side. So what we're going to do is hook up the back side. Stretch this over and hook it up into that. Next step, take your adjuster. You want to identify which side is the threaded end, which is this one. That faces towards the front. I'm going to thread it all the way in. Line it up and go ahead and install this. You have to stretch those shoes apart to get that on. There you go. Now we have our adjuster tab here, and what you want to do is take the spring, hook the spring on, and that should push up on that pin. And this next step we want to do is take this spring, and it needs to come up and over the adjuster tab here. Now as we adjust this wheel, you can hear it clicking. You can hear it engaging. So all of your spring setup is all correct. And as this wheel moves, this will lock it into place. You want to go ahead and inspect all of your springs. Make sure the springs are seated. Now, if your cable for the adjuster came out of the guide, I'm just using a screwdriver to push up on the bottom. Adjust the cable placement. Make sure it's in the groove. Check your springs. You can use the butt of a screwdriver. Tap on the top, make sure that these shoes are seated here. Check around the edges, make sure that these shoes themselves have a nice even amount of space on both sides. And use your palm if you want to go ahead and bump that around. Make sure that it's somewhat centered. Before installing our drum, make sure that the surface of your hub is really clean. Anything imperfections, raised, rust, anything like that can cause an uneven surface and that drum just won't fit right. Use your bristle brush. Go ahead and go around the face of this axle hub face and clean this up, especially around the inside hub section. Very, very important. Once that's cleaned up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to apply some anti-seize compound to the face of this hub so the drum doesn't rust to it. Go ahead and install your drum. Now when doing this here, not only want to make sure that it slips on, but you want to go ahead and wiggle it gently. You want to make sure that the clearance of the brake shoes is close to the drum. If it's not, then we're going to go ahead and adjust the adjuster on the bottom side to cause those brake shoes to come out and fit snugly. Our play is nice. I'm going to go ahead and set this in. And ours is a little too tight, so we're going to go ahead and adjust that adjuster on the bottom until we can get this to fit just right. So we have everything adjusted. Go ahead and give this a spin. Everything feels really good. On the back side of the wheel cylinder, use an 8mm socket, and we're going to loosen that. Now with this loose and opened up, this is going to allow for the brake fluid to come through the line and fill up that wheel cylinder. Once we see fluid start to come out of this, we're going to go ahead and tighten it down. With the brake bleeder screw undone on the back of the vehicle, come on up to the front. Underneath your hood, you're going to locate your master cylinder reservoir right here with the fluid in it. Go ahead and crack this open. Set that aside. This is going to release any pressure that might be in the line, and this will help with the gravity feed, filling up that cylinder. Now at this point here, we have the brake fluid coming out. I'm going to go ahead and snug this down. Once that bottoms out, just give it a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and grab some spray solvent, spray down the back of it, get rid of any of that extra brake fluid. You want to hop into that vehicle, step on the brake, make sure that brake pedal is firm. If that brake pedal is not firm, you're going to go ahead and start your brake bleeding process for all four wheels. Now that we had that fluid coming out in the back and we checked everything is good, come back to your reservoir. Make sure that your fluid level is still at the full. If it is not, go ahead and top it off with the recommended brake fluid. Ours is still good. Go ahead and install the cap. At this point here, we can go ahead and install our wheel and repeat for the other side. Install your wheel. I want to go ahead and get the lug nuts all started by hand first, and then we'll come on back and snug them down. Torque the lug nuts down to 100 foot-pounds. You're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.